Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So in today's video, we're gonna be doing another Google Slides presentation history video. So we're gonna be covering over the Franco-Prussian War from 1870 to 1871. So we're in this video, we're gonna be covering over to start over to what are the causes of the war, like how did the war started, and like we go over through many of the battles during the Franco-Prussian War and basically what's basically the outcome or like what happened after the war, like the German unification and the Paris Commune. So, but yeah, but before we get into this video here, if you guys haven't yet, please be sure to hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, don't forget to comment and turn on the bell notifications, and yeah, and we'll just basically see outcome in the aftermath here. How did it change like the policies throughout Europe here, and also in terms of policy, related to foreign relations and trade and industrialization, and so on and so forth. So let's get to it. All right, let's get started. So, what are the causes of the Franco-Prussian War? So, the immediate trigger was a dynamic dispute over because of basically the dispute over to whether the Prussian, like, basically of their cousin, wanted to do, the Prussian king wanted to basically have his son to become the throne of Spain, Wilhelm the second of Kaiser Wilhelm II. The real cause was stemmed to the conservative statesman of Otto von Bismarck manipulating the tensions over the rise of Prussia and seeking unity to desperate the German state and the kings here under the single country under the Prussian king Wilhelm. And Wilhelm had to make a telegram that was then later sent into to Bismarck here, and to that intercepted the message to France, and that made like basically the French that look bad and weak here, and thus the threatening the rise of power from Prussia. So that's why basically later on the French would then later declare war on Prussia, and the Franco-Prussian War started in 1870. So here we go. All right, so let's
One of the most
keep going to the next one. All right, so the first battles we're going to go over to is the Battle of Mas-la-Tour, which is fought in August 16th, 1870, was a pivotal Franco-Prussian War engagement where, despite its heavy outnumbered, a small Prussian force was aggressively blocked, and the retreat of 150,000 French army into the Rhine toward Verdun, intercepting that near Metz, and the Prussians forced the French into a defensive trap position where during the brutal conflict fighting between the French and the Germans, and setting a stage for the disastrous French defeat at Sedan. And the Prussian General von Alvensilben's Third Corps, later reinforced, was surprised and attacked the French, and believing that they were attacking the rear guard, and to the French army of the Rhine, led by Marshal Bazaine, was attempting to retreat from Metz and joined the forces at Chalons. The battle was noted for an intense fighting, including the last major cavalry engagement in Western Europe. The tactical victory for Prussia costed around like 15,000 to 17,000 casualties on each side, permanently trapped Byzantine's army, and directly leading the collapse of Napoleon III's regime here. So let's now get to the next battle. Alright, so the next battle we want to talk about is the Battle of Grevelet, which is on August 18th, 1870, which the Battle of Grevelet, or otherwise known as Saint Privat, which was the largest and deadliest battle of the Franco-Prussian War. Prussian forces under King Wilhelm I used their superior numbers and artillery to defeat Marshal Bazaine's French army, trapping them in Metz, and despite the heavy Prussian losses of around 2,000 more, the victory solidified the Prussian dominance. While the French inflicted the severe casualties, they surrounded their advantage, but allowing themselves surrounded by the force of the siege of Metz, marking the beginning of the downfall of the Second French Empire. The battle occurred into 2 days, and the Battle of Marla-Tour, with the French army withdrawing toward Metz, because by that time they were losing ammunition, and gunpowder against against the Prussians, and that they were basically the French were like basically outgunned, and like basically they were desperate, and that they were can't maneuver and no longer, and they were not effective enough against the Prussians. The German forces suffered around 20,000 casualties, while the French had suffered 13,000, including significant losses within the Imperial Guard. All right, now let's go to the Battle of Metz, which we mentioned. The Siege of Metz, launched from September 3rd to October the 23rd of 1870, it was a decisive Franco-Prussian War battle where Prussian forces under Friedrich Kahl surrounded forced to surrender Marshal Bazaine's 154,000 strong French army of the Rhine, following the defeat of Gravelotte and the trapped French army surrounded due to starvation, and also that they were lacking in efficient weapons and the massive turning point. With supplies exhausted over 440,000, the French soldiers surrounded on October the 29th of 1870, significantly aiding the Prussian victory in the war here. And then we have the famous battle, the Battle of Sedan, from September the 1st to the 2nd of 1870. So it was a decisive, catastrophic defeat in France of the Franco-Prussian War, where over 100,000 French troops, including French Emperor Napoleon III, was captured by the Prussian forces. Surrounded at the Sedan fortress, the French army, led by Marshal Macaron, was overwhelmed by the superior Prussian artillery and the strategic encirclement, leading to the collapse of the Second French Empire. So basically, like, that the French were basically, they did not do really so well in this battle against the Prussians, and because they were overwhelmed of the artillery gunfire, and that they were out of, they did not have enough superior guns, and they did not have enough food, and so, basically when they were desperate there, and it was basically that the Prussians were able to conquer territories France inland before they were able to capture Paris. All right, let's get to the next. Now we have the Siege of Paris, which launched on September 19th, 1870 to January 28th, 1871. The Siege of Paris was a pivotal 4-month investment of the Prussian-led forces during the Franco-Prussian War, depending on the January 28th, 1871, forced the surrender of the French Third Republic, causing the severe famine among partisans, promoting the abdication of Napoleon III, and resulting in the unification of Germany and the rise of the radical Paris Commune. Marking the end of the Franco-Prussian War, the unification of Germany ignited the social uprisings known as the Paris Commune, and the German victory that the Third French Republic was surrendered after a severe food shortages, eating zoo animals, and enduring 12,000 shells. Alright. And now let's talk about, basically now the outcome, and, after the Franco-Prussian War, we have the German unification in 1871, in which Otto von Bismarck, and the president of Prussia, before the war, he also striked not only a war against defeat of France, but before then, he also won an 1866 war against its neighbor, the Austrian Empire, and also conquered the territories, the province, and took over province of Schleswig and Holstein into these territories that defeated also Denmark here, and also following the war after defeating the French after the battles such as the Battle of Sedan here, as well as acquiring many of the southern German states here, but it was then proclaimed as the German Empire in 1871, in which then it was in the halls of mirrors at Versailles, and France, following the Prussian-led victory at the Franco-Prussian War, engineered by the Prussian Chancellor Otto von Bismarck, through the Republic of the Empire, united into the 24 German states under the Kaiser Wilhelm II. And this is also basically kind of the time period, also the Culture Fair, which was basically later on that basically Germany, the lands here were religiously actually more Protestant than a lot than Catholic, and also by that time here it was basically marked as one of the great powers of Europe here, It was basically that the French, and it marked also that the French were basically weaker here in terms of the military, and as well as also economically. And the unification created a new, powerful Germany that fundamentally alerted the European balance of power, leading to the rapid industrialization, such as like network, like massive like factories, spinning jennies, and water mills, as well as also railroads, telegraph lines, as well as also, um, and as well as also still working on steel and iron production here, and yeah, and so an establishment as the major European force, the major European power. And I've also got some of these two videos of the. If you guys want to watch, if you guys want me to watch any of these videos by the History Matters, please let me know in the comments. Or maybe I might just simply just like basically watch these videos by just decide if I watch it for as a future video. All right.
The 19th century.
Here we go. Now we have the Paris Commune, which was on March the 18th to May 28th of 1871. It was a radical socialist and a revolutionary government that ruled the Paris for 2 months after the French armies in their defeat in the Franco-Prussian War. It was born from the popular revolt against the French conservative Third Republic, aiming to establish the decentralized social republic and the progressive social policies, including the separation of church and state, abolishing the working force and the workers' control of the factories, and the movement was crushed during the Bloody Week here in the Semaine Saint Gallant, which I'll get to later, where the French government killed thousands of comrades. And also that the labor and the social welfare, the abolition of night shifts from bakers, prohibited the fines and the right of worker cooperatives, and taking over the abandoned factories in the depth of relief, the education, religion, the formal separation of the church and state, segregation of schools, as well as the initiation of the free and mandatory education. And it was also that the government replaced the withstanding army with a citizen militia, and it is also instituted of officials and empowered the local districts. It was the first working class insurrection to establish through temporary proletarian dictatorship, serving as a beacon for later socialist and communist movements. However, the Commune was isolated from the rest of France and lacking a central discipline and military strategy. It was brutally crushed by the National French Army from Versailles, resulting from around 20,000 to 30,000 deaths here. And that's where the Borough Commune had failed, because it was basically crushed by it militarily. Because before then they wanted like basically more radical change, more conservative policies, and more because of different parties, and as well as also separation of church and state, as well as mandatory initiation of free and secularization and free mandatory education. So too here, and but unfortunately that one failed there because of because they were crushed by the military. And then later on also, this was also basically during this time here also about the Dreyfus affair too here, which was named by a French general, Dreyfus, who went on trial here because many of the French had saw that what if he's sending a telegram, secret message to the weaponry to the Germans, and in which he was then proclaimed guilty, and then he was then sent into French Guiana, in which then but the only problem is that Dreyfus himself was Jewish, and that that anti-Semitism has been basically spreading around Europe since like forever, and so. And that's where Dreyfus was then held back and on trial again here, and then they were trying to identify the documents and papers that would prove that it was actually Dreyfus's handwriting here, and those were different. It was then divided up between those who are against Dreyfus and those who favored into Dreyfus. But then Dreyfus was then basically set free from this out of trial here, and then he later on in 1916 he would then later on become as like a French general and serve into the Battle of Verdun in World War One against the allied with the British and fighting against the Germans.
The
All right. Now let's go to the next, the Battle of Fort Idisi, and from April 25th to May of 1871. But it was a provisional siege during the Paris Commune, where the government of Versailles forced a heavy bombardment and captured the strategic from the National Guard defenders. It was after 2 weeks of intense combat. The fort was abandoned on May 8th, 1871, and accelerating the fall of Paris. The loss of Fort Edisi enabled the government forces to advance toward the city walls and contributing to the ultimate defeat of the Commune during the Bloody Week here, which is the Semigalati. So here, let's go to next. All right. So the Semigalante was a brutal, violent end of the Paris Commune, where the French government troops reconquered Paris, killing an estimate about 10,000 to 20,000 communards. Following the months of tensions, over 130,000 soldiers systematically crushed last stand barricades, leading to a widespread summary of executions and massacres. The intense street by street fighting ensued, and with the significant casualties on both sides, with the respirations was disparately severe against the working class communards. The final stand, the last major resistance crushed by the Belleville neighborhood at the Pierre Lachaise cemetery by May 28th. The retaliation in response to the Commune executed hostages, including the Archbishop of Paris and the funeral of several landmarks. So basically, overall, that's where basically the French forces had killed over many of the communards, and it basically brought the vital end to the French commune here, brought an end to the French peasants to adopt many of the communist or Marxist ideals around in France. And yeah, okay, and that's pretty much it. That was it. That was my Franco-Prussian War Doc Mole Google slide presentation here. I hope you guys basically enjoyed it, and if you want to see, of course, the usual history content like this, then what are you waiting for? Please sure to hit like, subscribe, and don't forget to comment, and don't forget to share this video to friends and family. And yeah, I'll see you guys in my next video. So, Mr. Aaron's out. Peace.